So thank you guys for being on the show. I really appreciate it so, so much. Um, Drew, you are at this point, like a regular on the show, which I love and
Yeah,
admire. And if people haven't figured out who you are by now, shame on you. But Nicola, this is your first time here. Tell
Yeah.
everybody a little bit about yourself if you don't mind.
Well, I started in comics close to 25 years ago, and Drew was one of the first people that I worked with. And since then, I've sort of gone on to be a pretty regular contributor at DC Comics, um, drawing sort of mostly Wonder Woman, but, kind of a whole lot of team books. And whenever I get the opportunity to return to Halloween Man, I take the chance and jump right in because I know that Drew's going to provide something hilarious for me to do, even if it's just a cover. He comes in with a hot idea, and I'm just like, right, that'll be one of the most entertaining things I've drawn all week.
That's awesome. And did you always know that art was the route that you wanted to go?
No, I could draw. I could always draw, but acting was kind of the profession that I trained myself in and kind of geared myself for. I was doing a lot of theater when I was a teenager, and when that career just sort of wasn't getting the results that I kind of needed to survive into my 20s, I kind of needed to put it away for a little bit just for my own mental health and my own sort of sense of keeping my self-esteem intact. I just put it away and was like, okay, I need to do something else. What else can I do? And drawing was something that I knew I could do, and I didn't quite know how to apply it in a way that might sort of help make me a living. And after exploring a whole bunch of different avenues, I changed the question in my head from what can I do with being able to draw to what do I want to draw? And straight away I was like, man, I wish someone would just pay me to draw Wonder Woman, which was immediately followed by, oh my God, there's a real job that exists somewhere in the world. Someone's got that job right now. I want that job. And
Wow.
so that sort of got me pointed specifically towards comics, which I'd read a few of, but I was never a big comic book reader. I just
Okay.
knew the character because of Linda Carter and the TV show in the 70s. She was my first superhero, and
Okay.
she was definitely my gateway drug to sort of loving costume heroes. And it was also something that I just never grew out of, sort of in those sort of non-nerdy years in your sort of later teens where you're trying very hard to be cool. I just never got over it. I never got over it. All of my very cool friends knew that I was obsessed with Wonder Woman. So I just, the fact that I sort of worked out for myself, taking the long and dumb way around to understanding that there is a job to be had in this business and then pursuing it.
That's awesome. So Linda Carter was my first and Adam West. Like it was a
Oh,
combined
yeah.
watch one and then watch the other. So I love that you said Linda Carter because I'm like, yes, that's queen, that's mother right there.
100%.
I
Still
have
not
the
over
theme
it.
song playing in my head. Right.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
like
You're Wonder
yes, and
Woman.
her twirling and turning around to change costume.
Oh,
I'm like here for all of
crazy.
it. So how did you figure out, okay, so this is the route I want to go? What
Mm.
were your next steps in order to achieve this goal, this new goal? Did she freeze? I think.
Uh, well, yeah, no, I didn't really know anything about comics creative, but at the time it was pretty small. And uh, back in the day, there just weren't any avenues. There was no sort of way to for an Australian to just sort of pursue a particular path and break into comics. So I just had to wing it. And, it was clear to me that the industry I wanted to be in was in America. And at the time, it was a very sort of boy-centric business in a way that I just don't think it is anymore. And so I just had to, in my late 20s, just sort of submit to the fact that I didn't know anything about the business. I didn't know anyone in the business. I just have to acknowledge that I don't know anything and be humble about it and just start asking even dumb questions and not be embarrassed about it and just go for it. And that's what I started doing. And it wasn't too long before I started getting a little bit of work here and then going over to the States and pursuing work over there. That's kind of when I met Drew. And, you know, a lot of these initial relationships were online, but the work came from just sort of going to conventions in the States and hustling.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that turned into work. You know, there were creative forums on websites, but that was all kind of a way for people to investigate creatives. But this is long before social media, so you couldn't really promote yourself. You could just sort of post stuff and hope that people saw it. And while that didn't sort of get me work, it certainly gave people who were starting to hear about me something to look at when they'd search for me. And that sort of really, really helped. But really, it was just being at San Diego Comic-Con with my portfolio under my arm and just hustling. And each time I went, I'd just get more work. And so that was kind of how my career sort of grew pretty quickly.
That hustle mentality. I love that. You keep going. You have to find your own avenues. Nobody's gonna make your dream come true but you.
Absolutely.
So I love
not.
that. Love that. So how exactly did you meet Drew? Did he meet you? You met him? How did that go?
We were both part of Mark Miller's message forum, Miller World, and then there was a creative forum on that, and I was posting a lot of the very, very, very primitive Halloween Man comics, and you know, a lot of fanfic. There was also a lot of fanfic that I posted, and Nicola very, you know, like everybody already knew that she was the bee's knees. Like she like her style was sort of already more fully formed than a lot of the other artists on there. And, you know, I very much was like, yes, I want to work with this person. And I did a Halloween Man Christmas story that was a jam story. And the other thing that impressed me, so like I gave her, I think it was like 2 or 3 pages. It wasn't that many. And not only did she turn in her pages, you know, and they looked good, but she turned them in very, very, very quickly.
Oh, wow.
Which, you know, like good and quick, you know, you're a unicorn in comics. So I was like, let's do, you know, I'm constantly writing, you know, I have a bazillion scripts. Let's do another. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah. Yeah.
More or less. So like, and, you know, we also just, we got along, you know, yeah. That's a big, you know, you relationships in this world of comics, you know, often the ones that last, it's purely based off of, you know, do you enjoy each other? Do you not just creatively mesh, but do you personally mesh? And we always have, yeah. You know, we're chums across the ocean.
Yeah. And I think something for the sort of specificity of the broad, but it's also specific, the sort of genres that Halloween Man encapsulates. I understood the references that Drew was making, even if I didn't know the specific reference, because it just might be too American for me to have, you know, it just hadn't made its way to Australia. I kind of got the gist of the various vibes he was going for and thought, yeah, I've got something that I can bring to that. You know, it's not just a I know what it is that you're after. I feel like I've got something that I feel like can enhance what you've already done, because that's really the role of an artist working with a writer in collaboration. I've always sort of seen the job of the artist is to best translate the intention of the writer. So it's not always like a slavish following. And most scripts, especially sort of at a pro level, are not terribly detailed. You know, they're pretty sort of slim. But it's like, you know, you're kind of expected to not just draw the story being written for you. Your job is to kind of flesh it out and give it sort of some real life and some flavor, and if you can understand the broadness of the intention, not just the words on the page, then you're doing your writer as much of a service as you can. Then that's the sort of the goal I tried to go for. And certainly sort of chatting with Drew and reading his scripts and seeing some of the previous stories that other artists have worked on, it was like, okay, not only can I see what I think you're going for, but I can think of some things that might sort of add flavor. And, you know, sometimes you get it wrong and sometimes you get it right. And sometimes you offer something up and the writer has no idea that that's what they want until they see it. And they're like, oh my God, that's it. And I've been pretty lucky in terms of sort of aiming in the right direction and providing some new and fresh and interesting stuff that writers are just like, yep, that's exactly what I'm after.
The other thing that Nicola, when she was taking this material, and I think more so than any artist that I had worked with into that time, is she grounded it in a sort of emotional reality. Because like the world of Halloween Man is very odd, you know, like it's got all these genre blending things. It's very quirky. But somehow Nicola made it feel very, you know, like she gave it a lot of emotional weight, because like you know, the thing that I'm constantly telling people I work with, like, yes, there is a weirdness to this, but I still want it to seem real to the people that are living in like, I never want the moment where like it's not Deadpool. Like I don't want them to suddenly break the world by looking at the reader. You know, if someone is killed by a giant ant or something, that's absurd, but that's really traumatic to somebody in the world of Halloween Man. And Nicola always made it feel like that. And I think that also subsequently the artists that came after her had that to look at as a template. And I think that really helped the tone of the comic going forward be more the tone that I was wanting, instead of something more like The Tick, I guess, or Flaming Carrot, where it was more overtly comedic, because I never really wanted it to be like a comedy book as such, even though it is very funny. If that makes sense at all.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me really early on, like that Comics Jam, I didn't really get it because I was only working on like a couple of random pages. And it was like, yeah, okay, I'm just sort of drawing whatever I'm drawing. But as soon as I got a story that gave me the full beginning, middle, and an end, what seemed sort of really clear to me was that it was really romantic. And I don't mean just the romance between Solomon and Lucy, but it was sort of, there was so much love within the world and love for these characters that it wasn't ironic. It was kind of a little bit earnest. And the sort of the friendships, even if they sort of bristled with each other, there was sort of some real emotional depth that that was kind of the thing that surprised me the most. Just sort of how, sort of how do I put this? There was a sort of overlying melancholy while also just being deeply emotional and romantic, and that kind of really touched me in a way that I was like, oh, this is a lot more than on first glance it seems to be. And that's always been one of the things that sort of brought me back to wanting to work on this world and work with Drew, is that it's always just sort of a little bit sexy, and it's always just a little bit romantic, and it's always just sort of a little bit, friendship is magic kind of thing, that there's something really genuinely charming, even amongst these sort of wild characters. It's always just sort of been beautiful to me.
There has to be a level of trust as well, too, working in a partnership like this. You have to trust in her skills and talent, and you have to trust in his skills and talent. Has that ever played a part where it was a little bit like, well, I know you said that you guys kind of like meshed well, but how do you respect and trust each other's work without overstepping those boundaries for people that are trying to find their other person, I guess?
Do you want to go first, or should I?
Sure. Drew is very, very, very gentle. When he's got notes, he's very sort of very cautious and very respectful and very and I'm Australian, so I'm just like, hit me with it, Drew. What do you want me to change? Because I'm more than happy to change. I really am more interested in him being happy with the end results than I am with feeling particularly precious about anything I've put down.
Okay.
I'm open to it, and Drew is very because I'm the next person in the cycle, so it's usually a one-way sort of conversation. If I'm sort of providing any kind of influence, it's in the work itself. It's not in a conversation that we have after the work. But on the pretty rare occasion when Drew sort of says, "Oh, do you mind sort of changing something?" I'm just like, "Yeah, whatever. I'm good." And that's sort of that makes the relationship pretty easy.
The weird thing is especially during the time period that we met, I was very, very, very angry in my 20s. I always tell people from the age of 19 to about 31, I was pissed off about something. And yet in the collaborative part of my life, the act of making comics, I always, and it's easy with someone like Nicola because like 99% of the time it's gonna look great. Like there's very, you say trust, but like she's got it, so there, most of the time my notes are minimal because they don't require, and if I'm being honest, like about the only character in the comic that I'm particularly like precious about the way she looks, it's Lucy. Like Solomon, like I don't, first of all, because he's kind of ugly to begin with, but secondly, like
to me,
no, I was gonna, that's
well,
why I made
to a lot of people,
I'm like,
to a lot of people, he's not ugly, but I probably have just angered my own fans right there. But I've always said that if I didn't want to be collaborative, I would be a novelist. I love working with artists, and I love that back and forth with artists. And there's always something thrilling that it's an instant dopamine hit when I see an image that previously just was like something that was fermenting up in my brain, and someone has taken that and given it a reality. So like I love artists, and so that's part of the reason why, despite the fact that I actually think it's made me a better person long term, because I've learned to kind of channel the softer side of me that comes from collaborating into other parts of my life. It's probably prepared me for fatherhood in some ways. Because I love the act of working with an artist. It's just so cool, and seeing a comic book come to life. There's just something magical about comics that doesn't exist really in any other medium, except maybe music. I think being in a band, oddly enough, might be the closest thing to making a comic, because you have several people coming together to make one thing. But other than that, I don't really think is something that doesn't require, like, movies obviously require a lot of people.
That's
but
like
it's
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
people.
people. Yeah, like
But
comics
there's also a director in charge of everybody.
Well, and in a way, I guess, to keep along those thoughts, like, I guess I would be the director and you would kind of be literally all of the actors.
But at least you're willing to listen to a different perspective, where a director might not so much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
See, I use this analogy all the time because I come from a sort of theatre background. And so when I'm talking to my theatre and film and TV mates, how I sort of break it down, and Drew, you might disagree with this, I sort of say the writer is the writer and the producer. And the artist is actually the director, because we're choosing the shots, and we're kind of the director and the cinematographer and the actors and the production designer and costume designer, and there's quite a few hats that are sort of on our heads, but we're all sort of working under the guidance of the writer, because the script is king, kind of like TV is a writer's medium and film is a actor's medium. Film is a director's medium. I feel like we're sort of somewhere in the middle. You're not a guest director on a TV show unless you're just sort of coming in to do a short story. But what makes the sort of comics experience so nice is that it's not hundreds of people. It's essentially like 2 or 3 people.
It's very intimate.
Yeah, it makes for sort of a really, really intimate sort of storytelling little family, little pool. It's lovely.
That. Yeah. That sounds
awesome.
It's
all of those are excellent points, and I'm thinking just about how different comics are from movies, which is kind of weird to say at a time where movies never have been trying harder to emulate comic books.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Halloween Man, the collection is coming out, or is it out already?
It is out. It has been out since
already.
September. This is kind of round 2 of publicity, because we are now available through Lunar, because of the fall of Diamond. There was, when initial orders, it's now in theory easier to get. And aside from being available through Lunar, it is available through Simon & Schuster, Filbo, and of course, if you want to support Lex Luthor's platform, you can get it on Amazon.
Lex Luthor.
He's bald. He's got a rocket
Lex
ship.
Luthors right now.
That's true.
This is true. This is very, very true. Yeah. No, for real. Yeah. So what made you decide to do like a whole collection of oh my God, Halloween Man? I don't know why my brain just stopped working for me.
It happens. I'm very sleep deprived all the time, and I'm constantly having
old.
moments where like it was the 25th anniversary, so that was a no-brainer. It was also talking to Scott from Red 5, because he was looking at how we met at a convention called Comics Palooza in Houston, and he first of all, he didn't understand why there wasn't another publisher that hadn't snatched this up after all this time, because he was like, this has a huge fan base. I don't understand. And I was like, I don't understand either. But so it was sort of that wanting to honor the 25th anniversary, but also, I hate to say it, commerce. I do have a kid now, and to people thinking that, well, gee golly, this would be a good way to give fans something cool to put on their bookshelf, but also looking at the old Halloween Man art and being able to like clean it up and clean up the lettering and everything, and really kind of try and put the best version of it out as well, was a motivating factor. Because like a lot of those comics, they never saw a wide release outside of being a web comic, and then there was like editions that I would sell at conventions, but this is really like the premium version. Like, it looks really good. And, especially if you're a fan of Nicola's, you're able to kind of go back and look at like the earlier end of her career and see like the way her artwork has progressed. And you can do that with one book, because you can see the art in the interior, and you can see the shiny new cover that she did, which is gorgeous.
I like shiny. I'm a sucker for shiny. So by any chance, do you know how many books Nicola has actually drawn? Nicola, do you know the number?
No, because every now and then I'll sort of see a page and I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that story. I've totally forgotten about it. Because it's sort of been sporadic, and over a 25-year period. It just sort of like, there are some stories that have always stuck with me, but then there are others where it's like, I've got an image in my head, but I can't remember what story it's from. It's like an image that I either remember drawing, or it was used in promotion a fair amount. So it just sort of got itself drilled in to my head. And I'm just like, yeah, what story was that from? I can't remember what story that was from. But there's not been once that I've sort of worked on one of these stories and just thought, this is not only delightful and hilarious, but there's something in there that's sort of absolutely going to be a challenge, and a sort of feel a little creatively liberating and exciting to work on.
Is there a favorite character that you like to draw?
Look, I do love Solomon. He's sort of because to me, and to what Drew was saying earlier, Lucy is this incredible character, and for her to be that smart, that beautiful, that sort of really spunky and interesting, and for her to love him, he's got to have something going on. And there is this sort of lovely, sort of melancholy, romantic, complicated guy that, I think girls kind of really, really kind of fall in love with. And so to me, finding that in him on a regular basis, regardless of whether or not he's, fighting flying monkeys or whatever it might be, whatever his challenge of the day might be, there's something sort of genuinely heroic and charming about him. And so finding those moments and sort of giving them the time and the space that they deserve. When Drew's sort of written a scene where it's like, oh, there's that moment. I really wanted to sort of give that moment its shine. He's my favorite. But then, there are some crazy characters that have appeared here and there that I wish I could draw more. Like Mangoat had always appealed to me. It's like, this is the dumbest character ever. I love him. And at one point for one of the stories, we got to sort of do the Solar City sort of justice team of people. I forgot what they were called now.
Sentinels of Justice.
Sentinels of Justice. Them. I got to design all of them, and that was a hoot because some of these characters were wild, and it was like, I'm just going to enjoy the fact that some of these characters seem really traditional heroes, and some of them are like, are we sure they're heroes? Because they're fucking crazy. But sort of sticking them on a team together, that was they were a lot of fun.
Okay. So is there a new Halloween man in the works?
There's always more Halloween man in the works. I have a lot of irons in the fire, and I there's going to be some stuff coming out on the Global Comics platform over the next year, of course, because we're going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary through the rest of this year. But there is also something very exciting that is also theoretical, but very exciting that I can't talk about right now.
I love an exclusive.
But if you want to be on the other side and you want that inside baseball, you can join the Halloween Man Patreon, support the making of the comic, and also learn what I am alluding to, because it's very cool.
Yes, I got my Patreon notification about it this morning.
Yeah.
And I was like, there it is. It's great.
We're gonna put that Patreon link in the description because we're all gonna do this. I'm nosy, my peoples are nosy, so we're all gonna join because I needs to know. And it's not an exclusive on here, but go to the Patreon and it'll be exclusive there. So
cute.
What other projects are you working on that you can talk about?
The Matron 2, not called Electric Boogaloo. We have our third Kickstarter, which is going to finish out this first story arc of the Matron, and then we are doing we're hopefully, let's say, sales pending, but we already have a second miniseries in the works that is sort of the aliens to the first series Alien. And it's going to be called the Matron Feud. And that will be with my amazing collaborators, David Bowles, Monica Gallagher, and Harry Saxon. A very, very, very stacked creative team that I feel blessed to be a part of. And that's my other big project, which I'm sure at some point I'll be back on the show to talk about the Matron.
Yes. What about you, Nicola? Anything you can tell us that you're working on currently? I know those NDAs.
I think no, I'm pretty loosey goosey when it comes to talking about shit. I get in trouble for it all the time, but I don't care. And I'm pretty sure they're all announced.
Okay.
I think. I've got a short story in the Superman Spider-Man crossover coming from DC and Marvel.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty fun.
Cool.
That one's written by Greg Rucka, and it's essentially a squaring off between the Daily Planet and the Daily Bugle.
Nice.
So excited to read that.
Yeah.
And I'm currently working on a short contribution to the DC Pride Month issue, which I've never contributed to before. I am doing, I don't know if I can talk about this, but let's do it. I'm doing a extended issue story that's part of the Detective Annual this year.
Oh, okay.
I shouldn't say who's in it yet, but
let's not get fully in trouble. I like an exclusive, but I don't want to get in trouble.
But Tom Taylor has written that one, and I'm starting that kind of this afternoon, actually.
Nice.
And I've got something else lined up for after that. I'm doing a Conan story. a Savage sort of Conan story, which I'm very excited about. And then after that, if all goes according to plan, my husband, who's a writer, he and I are working on developing a IP. And it should be just a one-shot story that we've been talking about for the last couple of years. And I think we've found the window in which to do it. That's kind of occupying a lot of my brain space because we're building it from the ground up.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, yeah, that will probably see me through to the end of the year.
That's exciting, though.
Yeah, it's one of those years where it's like lots of bits and pieces rather than like one long job.
Yeah.
But this is kind of my favorite kind of year because it just gives me a little more flexibility, a little more creative challenge. I hear babies.
Yeah.
And yeah, some of them are sort of fun stories. I've done a lot of women team, girl teams, kid teams, and heroes throughout my career. And I've sort of wanted to do a couple of things that are a little more macho and testosterone-y because it's just not a field that I get to work in terribly often. But this year it seems like it's really delivering on that front.
That's exciting.
With Conan and Batman and blah, blah, blah. So we'll see.
When you do the press tour, come stop by my little
do. Absolutely. Let me know.
Yes. That's exciting. So I usually like to end with some words of wisdom or some motivation for people that are wanting to get into the comic book field. I have a lot of people that are trying to start a comic or too scared to start a comic, whether they're the writer, the artist. Any words of encouragement or words of wisdom from the artist side? Let's start with Nicola.
Oh, okay. The hardest thing about being a creative is finishing the jobs that you started. And so I'm always saying, you know, if you want to be in this career, it's absolutely possible, but you've got to learn the discipline of finishing the jobs. And I always say start small because almost every new person that I see coming along, whether they're a writer or an artist and they've got aspirations for a sort of good long career in the business, they're coming with their opus idea. And it's like that opus idea you're not ready for. You don't have the stamina, you don't have the training. You're going to burn out 3 pages in because you just don't know how to get to the end. Yeah. And so I'm always sort of saying, start small, start with a 3-page story, start with a 4-page story, build up from there until you've really got some momentum. And that opus story, that's 10 years away. Wait for 10 years. Spend the next 10 years building up to being able to do the best job you can by this great idea that you've got, because otherwise you'll waste that opportunity.
And from the writer's standpoint, True, words of wisdom that you haven't given us yet?
Well, I'm going to take a page from my buddy John Logan, who is a much more successful writer than I am. And even if you don't know his name, you've seen one of the movies he's worked on. Just look up his IMDb. But he says, be benevolent. Because it's a lot easier to get work if you are pleasant to work with. And, you know, that is true in the movie industry. It's also true in comics. One of the reasons why Nicola and I are still doing stuff together is that we get along. And, you know, I think there is a lot creatives, there can be a lot of ego involved, and knowing when to curb that and be humble and just be friendly. I mean, not even just be humble, be friendly, because you need to know your worth. You know, like there's a fine line between being humble and being a doormat. But be friendly, be polite, be kind, be benevolent. So that's the words I'm ending on is be benevolent.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for stopping by and talking to me, especially about Halloween Man and how you guys got together. I love hearing the backstory. It's amazing. And I appreciate you guys so much.
Thank you so much for having
Yeah,
us.
thanks for having us.